I had been through another RE/MAX brokerage, a difficult financial time. And I saw the aftermath of that on both the broker and the remaining agents. And it was evident that this was perhaps happening again. And I had a very candid discussion after 2 or 3 or 12 attempts with the owner of that firm. And I said, you got to level with me. What's going on? And I am grateful that they did. And that for me was a catalyst for me to affiliate elsewhere. If you look at kind of the trajectory of my broker partnerships, they had pretty much, it's been an independent for the majority of my career at that point.
Welcome to the show, Sarah Close.
Thanks for having me.
Sarah, thank you for jumping on. I know you're busy. We appreciate you being here.
Delighted to do it.
Yeah, no, so excited to hear your vision and hear your background and where you're going in the real estate community. We've talked about pillars in the community, and Sarah Close is definitely a name that I hear quite often. So thank you as well for all that you do for the real estate community.
Very nice of you to say. Thank you. Yeah,
yes,
I'm the lucky one. I got a good group to work with.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. So Daniel's going to start, but typically before we dive into the business, which is going to be fun and fascinating, we like to talk about the personal life, right?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So I think, we all have lives outside of work. And
we do.
And a lot of us in the real estate industry have lives before real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't have a lot of that.
No? Okay.
Yeah. I wish I did.
We got a lifer.
Yeah. Just saying.
Yeah.
No. So let's see. This is 2024. So I am in the, I guess, 33rd year of my career.
Wow.
So where that puts me in the timeline was, of course, before infancy. I was licensed, but in all reality, I graduated from college in 92 from Miami of Ohio with a degree in finance and economics.
Okay.
That was in May on Mother's Day. Took a job with Procter Gamble here in Cincinnati in their F&A department. And before my job started in June, I went ahead and got my real estate license.
Wow.
So,
wow. Was that 2 weeks?
It was about 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I had a lot of my courses, with your undergrad counted. You're still in the study mode, know. It's like, I got this. Mm-hmm. So I sat there in Hondros in North Dayton with no Zoom, no nothing, with my paperback and my Hondros book, and got through a couple of chapters and did a little magazine reading and got through those. And it's all good.
And then boom.
Yeah.
So did you work for Procter Gamble? And if so, for how long?
I did. I worked for Procter Gamble. It was about 10 months. Okay. So I am actually a third generation realtor. Mm-hmm. So in my family, you are given, you're handed your pacifier, and then you're handed, go get your real estate license. So, my grandfather, uncles, cousins, myself, my father, all are or were practicing agents at one time or another. So that's why that event took place. It was like, hey, just go get this. Yeah, just have it.
Just do it.
Yeah, just have it. So I moved here to Cincinnati. I grew up in Dayton, south part of Dayton, warm and cheerful Centerville.
Nice.
And moved to Cincinnati to work for Procter. At that time, they had divisions. I was in the soap division and in their F&A department.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was there a little bit less than a year.
Uh-huh.
When I sat for my real estate exam, just like now, broker has to sponsor you.
Yeah.
That was a little more difficult at that time because I was going to be a bivocational agent, and very few companies were interested in having a bivocational agent at that time.
Wow.
And I was fortunate enough to meet Sharon Kiefer, who was partnered with Dave McDonald at McDonald Kiefer Realtors in Hyde Park. And she said, we went to lunch at this little restaurant called Indigo's, and she's like, I'll take a flyer on you. And I'm like, okay. So I was lucky enough that they hired me, and they transferred from a boutique type brokerage to a RE/MAX around Christmas of that same year, about the end of the year. And they came to me and said, hey, you need to know I'm doing this. And so our economics are going to change. Here's what they're going to look like. If you want to go somewhere else, now is the time to start thinking about that. My dad had opened the first RE/MAX in Dayton, Ohio when I was in high school. And he basically said, if you think you're going to do this, that's an amazing place to be. So took the leap and left Procter in April of 93, I guess that would be. And my whole, what would that be? 22-year-old logic was, all right, this really bombs. I can sling drinks and bartend and make my house and car payment. That was my whole math equation. I mean, so that was it. And so I think, terror is a good motivator.
Sure.
And never look back. Had a great first year.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So with it being kind of a family industry, was it easy for you to kind of lean on your father and others as far as not necessarily, a leg up, but like as far as advice or mentorship or anything like that?
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
And that meant my family was not in this market.
Yeah.
And having a person that you know and trust to be able to say, why is this happening? Why is that happening? And to know you're getting a straightforward answer was highly useful, besides being encouraging, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say that I owe pretty much Dave McDonald, hands down, made the biggest difference for me.
Right.
I would meet him before work to 6:30, 7:30 in the morning. He'd meet me to go through contracts. I'm like, what does this mean? What does that mean? I'll never forget where I took a day off work one day to go on agent tour with him. This is when you toured. Like for real, the MLS was like orange type and a black screen. And then we had a machine with the box and like the little, like,
yeah,
you know
those
what I'm
old
talking
school
about?
printers.
Old school printer.
Yep.
Yeah, that was MLS. And the way that you would see photos, because there was no, Al Gore had not yet invented the internet, was, you'd get out and see the houses.
Sure.
So I remember touring with Dave one Tuesday. I took a day off work just so I could, and he drove this Volvo forever. So anyone who remembers Dave McDonald, it's like Dave McDonald Volvo, station wagon. Like they are forever together in my mind.
That sounds great.
We were over near Marymount, and there was this sign, and it said like, I don't know, end of like where Madison Place runs into Marymount. And I remember I said to him, this is embarrassing to admit, but I was like, wait, you mean the school district stops right here? Like, and that's this? And he looked at me, he's like, yeah, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I had no idea. I mean, it was he's like, oh my God, what have we done? We let this girl in our office.
What are we doing?
But I mean, he was great. So I was very fortunate to get to work with both Dave and Sharon because they were exceedingly patient. And
so in those first few years,
mentorship.
How did you really find yourself growing? I mean, obviously those mentorships help.
Yeah.
But as far as your growth,
right, it's a great question.
how did you
Open houses?
Nice.
That was it.
Really?
I knew very few people. So, and the people that I did know, we were still like putting nickels together to go to, go buy beer. I mean, my sphere was not into house.
They weren't buying houses
buying.
yet.
They just weren't. Yeah. Just, open houses were a really useful tool for me. I didn't know people. The agents at our office were generous enough to allow me to host their open houses.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of my business, my first year, came from open houses.
That's fantastic.
I think I had a referral from a friend, from a guy who worked at Xerox.
Wow.
And other than that, it was pretty much open houses.
Wow.
And I love open houses still.
Yeah.
Like, I think
that was
they
going to be
are-
my next question.
They are. And I'm so grateful that the market has taken a minute so that those opportunities are now available where you're actually opening a house that's still for sale,
Right.
which is a novel concept in this more recent market. But that is a wonderful tool to have an opportunity to present yourself as a professional,
Sure.
get that one-to-one,
Interaction.
yeah, especially I think now where so much of our interaction is can be augmented or diminished by the tools that so many of us use to communicate,
Sure.
social media, et cetera, et cetera.
Text messages.
Yeah. I mean, you lose all that context and tonality and all those other things.
Yep.
And open houses give you that. You are providing a service because you're demonstrating the property for that prospective buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And by definition, you're already doing a service for this individual.
Right.
And it puts you in a nice place to begin what could be a potential business relationship.
It's wonderful.
So I love them.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And I think they're going to be even more valuable with the regulatory changes around buyer brokerage agreements.
Mm.
So I love them. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10.
10
Yeah,
out
that's
of 10.
great.
Yeah. Skip the Bengals day. Don't start at a 1 o'clock kickoff if it's at home games.
Yeah.
Pro tip. Yeah.
Don't ever do that.
Yeah. Don't do that.
Yeah, that's going to be a dead open house.
Yeah.
So you're with Remax.
Yep.
You know, obviously we know you as Sarah Close with Keller Williams Advisors.
Yeah.
How was that transition, or when did that occur? Like, how did the Keller Williams come about?
Not planned.
Yeah.
And here's how it came about. Over the years, I had moved to a different Remax franchise. I had moved areas of town. I was I was associated with a different brokerage, and unfortunately, there was evidence of financial difficulty, and I had been through, not with Dave or Sharon, but with another Remax brokerage, a difficult financial time, and I saw the aftermath of that on both the broker and the remaining agents. And it was evident that this was perhaps happening again. And I had a very candid discussion after 2 or 3 or 12 attempts with the owner of that firm. And I said, you got to level with me. What's going on? And I am grateful that they did. And that for me was a catalyst for me to affiliate elsewhere. Yeah. So this was in late 04, early 05.
Okay.
And I had been, if you look at kind of the trajectory of my broker partnerships, they had pretty much, it's been an independent for the majority of my career at that point.
Yeah.
So getting out of the Remax system at the time, I had grown my business largely through my own lead generation sources, not through brokerage referrals, et cetera. And so I was pretty independent in my lead generation. And when I looked at my cost structure that I had been accustomed to, which was essentially a hoteling arrangement with Remax, which actually worked very well, and had developed an independent source of leads, overlaying that to what at the time were the compensation models in our market was jarring for me.
Wow.
The brokerage splits were, in my opinion, for my type of business, not tenable. And so what does a girl do? I called my dad, and I'm like, Dad, here's what's going on. This is who I've talked to. What do you recommend? And he said, I was talking to a friend of mine, an agent in Dayton. He goes, and there's this company, I can't remember the name, but they take so much, and then it's a cap, and then you don't pay anymore. I'm like, who's that?
Yeah, that sounds kind of nice.
Calling me back. It's called Keller Williams, and I will never forget. It was February of 04. And I'm down at, you guys know where the Meridian condominium is on Golden Avenue and Mount Lookout. I remember sitting in the parking lot in my Suburban calling literally 411 and getting their phone number. Wow. And calling down to Austin. I'm like, hey, I'm an agent in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm just trying to figure out what your all's deal is. And that was the beginning of I'm probably their only OP that was like, hey, come me, talk to me. But it was, that's how that started. And then the next step to that was after I got associated with basically a guy who was like a regional director, the guy responsible for growing out this part of the country. Yeah. He said, well, this is how we do this. You go down to Austin. I forget, it was 2 or 3 days, maybe more. I don't remember. And this thing called franchise systems orientation. See what you think. So what do? I drag my dad with me. And my dad's
awesome.
Like, you do not want to do this. My dad who started Remax, he's like, do not, just as a bet, just go sell. There's more money in selling. And there is more money in selling, just in case anyone's wondering. Yeah. And, day one, he's like, this really, I'll go. I don't think this is, I had 2 young kids at the time. Let's see. And my daughter was born February of 04. So I had a year-old and a child that was born in 2001. So what is that? 1 and 4?
Yeah.
Anyway,
4
they're
or
little.
5, yeah.
And On day 2, he was sitting in the row in front of me. He turns around, he looks at me. He's like, all right, you got to do this.
That's awesome.
It was pretty funny. He's like, all right, you got to do this. And got back in town and had the good fortune that there were a couple of other individuals in our area that were currently in quiet dialogue with the same guy. And he said, hey, can I share your name? I said, sure. I'm like, I talked to my broker, he knows,
Sure.
and I was lucky enough to get connected with a few people you guys probably know, Jerry Garrison,
Yeah.
who at the time was with Huff Realty, and Doug Mansler, who at the time was with Coldwell Banker, and Carol Meadows, who was with Comey Shepherd at the time. And they were all 3 independently evaluating the same opportunity. So the 4 of us got together. And we're like, well, we'll just do 4 of these and we'll do it this way. And it's no big deal because we had no idea what we were doing. And that's how our partnership formed.
It's amazing.
And we're still all partners
Yeah.
today, which is remarkable.
That's really cool.
19
They're
years
great
later.
people. I mean, you
That was
never know what
dumb
you're going to
luck.
be getting into when you
Yeah.
get partners like that. But like Doug, I don't
Yeah.
see him often, but he's like, hey, Pat, how you doing?
It's a good dude.
Every time I see him,
Yeah.
and I don't see Jerry as often, but like I can fall back on my relationship with Doug and know that he's just a very, very nice person.
Yeah. They're
So
all very nice people.
yeah, you guys
and
are
that was
great.
good fortune.
Yeah.
That was genuinely good fortune. So
So how did you come up with advisors? I have to ask.
At the time, and if I remember correctly, I think we need to credit Carol Meadows for this.
Nice.
So remember, this is like ancient history. This is almost 20 years ago now. And there was thought put into where would we show up in the white pages.
Wow.
Mhm. A
Wow.
for
Okay.
beginning of the alphabet.
No kidding.
No kid, I swear. That was
Unbelievable.
part of the calculus.
I would
Yeah.
not even have thought.
I
that.
That
just
used to be
can't
a
even
big
believe we thought.
strategy.
That has to
Well,
be.
like
Yeah.
pricing used to be a strategy. Like, how do you become the first one on the MLS? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just crazy
Yeah.
to think about.
Genius.
Yeah. So that started in February of 2004, and we got our franchise approval December 23rd. I'm sorry, this is 2005. Got our franchise approval December 23rd of 2005. My dad was gracious enough to serve as our first broker and team leader.
That's great.
And off we went
Man.
into the brokerage abyss.
Is your dad
Wow.
retired now?
He is retired now,
Okay.
and he's loving it.
He's like, yeah, leave me alone.
He pretty much said that to me once. He because he served at as our broker for a long time, and he's like, I'm about done.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm
Yeah.
about done. And then he was like, no, I'm done. I'm like, don't you want to like put your your license in the holding company? He's like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So so he is hunting, fishing, and golfing and
Good for
playing
him.
cards
That's awesome.
all over South Dayton,
Good for him.
living his best life.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, obviously, when I think I was just telling Daniel this, I started this 6 years ago. So like Keller Williams was well established as far
Yeah.
as advisors is concerned,
Yeah.
well established. So you guys were always a brokerage that I wanted to tap into and get to know a little bit more.
Mhm.
So what was the strategy on growth for you guys when you started to where you guys are now? Because it's you have some of the best agents in the city
do.
working with you, and I think the culture that you guys have built based on those conversations is just absolutely phenomenal as well. So
That's very nice of you to say. I'm really pleased with
Absolutely.
our culture and our environment.
Yeah.
And it is simply the mosaic compilation of some really awesome people.
yeah,
So we have very good fortune with who we've been able to partner with.
yeah. So how's
Business.
that growth, and were you expecting the kind of growth that you guys have experienced?
It's I would answer that question differently based on what part of the timeline we were on.
True.
So I will say this in at the end of 2005, beginning of 2006, we all know what was
It
ahead of us.
was a great time to start a brokerage, right?
Yeah, we felt. I was like, "What is wrong with us?"
Dang it.
But initially, that feeling for me was, "Why is this so hard?"
Yeah.
And not that I didn't expect it to be challenging, but what I was not aware of because it just hadn't shown up yet was what was happening in the market. It hadn't the great depression or recession or whatever you want to call it that hit the real estate market that was industry, instigated, was starting to show up in the industry, but it hadn't really, there were no metrics yet behind it. It was like anecdotal. It was, it was like the calm before the storm. It's like, wait, why is this property taking so much longer? Now, what are we doing wrong? Are we not training correctly? Not what we expected that way. But I will tell you that when I also think about what that caused us to do from an ownership and management perspective is we had a very low cost structure and we kept it very low because there was a lot of uncertainty.
Sure.
And I think if we would have opened 12, 24 months earlier, it's very plausible to assume that we might have had a much higher cost structure, and that would have been potentially more difficult to endure that stretch of time.
Right.
And then as it turns out, the Keller Williams model as a whole does very well in markets that are skill based. And the reason is that it is a training and coaching is what underpins the organization. And so as long-term successful agents, we're experiencing a market unlike what really anyone had experienced to that point.
Absolutely.
We were fortunate in that with that national organization, we had just sort of the fast pass to a lot of data and a lot of resources around training. And it was sort of like a, Red Cross kind of fast response. We are fortunate that we did have a lot of answers. And the company continues to stay at the forefront of finding answers as markets change.
Wow.
Right.
So that was very beneficial for us.
That's great.
Yeah.
I imagine it was with the more recent NAR stuff and
Yeah.
everything else too.
Very fortunate. Yeah. It's very fortunate.
So, I mean, it's probably safe to say that's probably what separates you guys from a lot of brokerages then too, is the back end education and support that you guys get on a national level too.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. There are all different types of brokerages.
Sure.
And within that continuum of brokerages, there are different financial models and different environmental models. There are different service offerings. And there is not a one size fits all inside of our industry.
Right.
So I think, from an agent standpoint, the lane that we try to stay in is the one that we've really thought long and hard about what is it that we are going to deliver to the agent population. And that doesn't mean that it's the right thing for every person. You know what I mean? Like but the field conditions that we win on are that we have an absolutely, I believe, unsurpassed research and training and coaching initiative that is out of Austin that we benefit from. So
That's awesome.
I'm not exactly sure what the total agent count is right now in Keller Williams Realty International, but it's approaching 200,000. Maybe it's 160, 170. I don't know the exact number. I probably should, but I don't. At the advisors and now Pinnacle level, what we really focus on is how do we provide the consulting arm that makes those resources actionable. So we all have the same stuff, but it's like walking through a library. If you don't know how to take the book off the shelf and implement what you're reading, it's not helpful.
Sure.
Right.
So we really focus on how can we be effective in creating that area of our company that is consultative to make those resources actionable. And then we've supplemented that with a very rich suite of services that are not traditional in the Keller Williams world. So transaction coordination, full-time technical director. We have an events and social coordinator. We have a full-time marketing department. And as many of those things as we can offer at no charge to our agents, we do.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I wonder why you get people coming that way.
Well,
Makes
and
perfect sense.
I think Keller Williams in general has kind of found this sweet spot. you talked about different compensation models,
Mhm.
and there's not a one size fits all, but
There's
I think
not.
that Keller has found a really nice sweet spot in terms of like that compensation model, and in terms of the support and the
Right.
services that you
Mhm.
are able to provide.
Right.
Because sure, you could maybe pay less somewhere else, but you're probably not going to have very much support. And then on the flip side, you might pay a lot more and have a very, very high level of
Yeah.
support that, maybe somebody
Right.
might need or prefer. But I think, like I said, the Keller Williams model has kind of really hit a sweet
Yeah.
spot.
There's a lot of different types of agents. So there are agents that approach the real estate business with the intent and, of course, succeed of genuinely building a business inside the
Mhm.
industry.
Right.
You don't need to have a brokerage to do that. I
Right.
mean, we can point to innumerable sales teams that are operating like mini brokerages across the
Mhm.
country at a very high level.
Yeah.
So there are individuals that are very interested in that path.
Right.
There are what I might call like a solopreneur or essentially someone who just simply wants to be self-employed.
Yeah.
And real estate is their vehicle for doing that.
Right.
They have no interest in growing an organization, and there's no right or wrong. That's
just not what
that's
they
their
want.
path.
Yeah.
There are people that are in our field because they really want to be vertically integrated,
Mhm.
and they've got another they're builders or they're flippers or they're investors,
Right.
and they want to be able to control the sales function of that vertical.
Mhm.
So they're in our business as well. And we also have some folks that simply want to be a DIY realtor. And then, thanks to HGTV, we've got a handful of folks that just genuinely like houses
Mhm.
and want to have their license and be involved in more honest, more, I'll use
Almost
the
like
word hobbyist.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
going to say.
Yeah. And so when I think about our value proposition, and we think about this all the time, because there are new players in the field, there are changes to our incumbents all of the time. So we look at it ad nauseum. And what my goal is, the company exists so that every agent's able to reach their business goals in real estate.
Mhm.
It's not important to me what those goals are from a production standpoint. What's important to me is that they are meaningful to the person who has authored them,
Mhm.
and that we are the partner that is helping them reach them.
That's awesome.
So if we are doing that, and if we are helping them figure out how much time they're going to spend in their hours working, and because of the service module we're providing in our partnership, they can do that at the highest level of efficiency, that's what we want to be.
Right.
So we don't talk a lot about, you'll hear a lot of things about selling the most units, moving the most volume, making the most GCI. The metric that I think is the most important, that's very difficult to discern, is the most dollar productive hours.
Mhm.
How much return are you getting on your time that you're electing to work?
Sure.
Right.
And you
More
can
about
break that down
efficiency.
to a phone call.
Yeah,
How much do you make every time you make a phone call?
Mhm.
exactly. Exactly.
That's
Efficiency
awesome.
and effectiveness.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Agents have 5 core responsibilities. I think there's like 172 jobs that an agent
I
has,
believe
like
it.
tasks or
Gosh.
whatever.
Mhm.
But there's 5 core, and they are lead generation, as much as we don't like that word always, communication generation, conversations, whatever that is, follow up,
Mhm.
going on appointments, negotiating contracts, and practicing our skills.
Hmm.
5 things.
That's awesome.
If as a broker partner, I can help alleviate the balance of those things outside of those 5. This is like no one can do your sit-ups for you. It's that
Right.
kind of concept.
Right.
But over here, if I can help make that a lighter lift so that agent is freed up to be the person they want to be for themselves, their community, their hobbies, we
For
win.
sure.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, we win.
That's a big win.
Sarah, I'd love to ask for your perspective on kind of the current market and where
Sure.
things are, and even get some advice for agents from you. But before we do, I always love to thank Back to Back Ministries for letting us use their awesome studio here. Quick shout out for them. Back to Back Ministries is a global nonprofit orphan care organization with their sights set on providing care for today and hope for every tomorrow. From Cincinnati, Ohio to Hyderabad, India, staff teams around the world are stepping into hard stories and choosing to stay. To learn more about the work Back to Back does, how you can get involved, and why a global team won't stop until every child is known and loved, you can visit backtoback.org today.
Thank you, Back to Back.
As
It's really
always.
nice space.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
That's great, isn't it?
It's wonderful
Yeah.
that they let. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate.
So with that said, what are you seeing in the market right now? What's your perspective? What's your take?
It's a great question. And the market is what I'm seeing is from the agent's perspective, depending on essentially how long they've been participating in the market. I'd say that is the biggest influencer to how an agent's perceiving the market.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been in an increasing market for an unprecedented amount of time, where we've seen consistent price increases, et cetera. And we are now starting to see that rate of increase, I'm going to say, normalize.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for some folks that is being perceived as a bad market or a poor market, or the market is not good, or I'm going to have to wait until the market does something.
Mm-hmm.
When in actuality, if we think about the long-term trajectory of pricing, and from like 1970 to now, on average, home prices go up 3.94% a year. If we looked at that, typically that trend line.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we had a pretty significant setback in that 2008-ish or so time frame for some time. That, of course, we would see average sale price at that time to be below what that trend line looks like.
Mm-hmm.
We've now more than made up for that shortfall. But what's interesting is we haven't grossly overcompensated for it. So if we look at the national average sale price right now, we are just about 7% above where we would have been if the trend would have stayed steady.
Wow.
So what that tells me is that there's no cliff to fall off of, and that there are continuing to be enough sides available. Inside our firm, when we look at our agents' GCI, which, just speaking very plainly, is important that our agents, that is their living.
Yeah.
If I look at those figures year to date, that number's up almost 15%.
Wow.
And our agent count, we are currently at 606 licensees with our firm. And we started the year at 614.
Mm-hmm.
So I mention that because that doesn't necessarily mean that we've added a bunch of agents. And so that's why, there's more GCI coming in.
Right.
No, but there are a lot of opportunities for agents that are using this distraction
Mm-hmm.
in the market of a change in the economics, the buyer brokerage, regulatory changes. Of course, we had the MLS thing last year. Those distractions can take your eye off of the needle.
Sure.
Right.
And I think the agents that are using this as a time to really focus are seeing phenomenal results. And there are more than enough sides of real estate being transacted in our market for every agent that elects to make this, a significant part of their professional portfolio.
Right.
It's phenomenal.
That's great insight. Now, speaking to agents, what kind of advice, given these market conditions and given the fact that it's not a down market, what would you say to either agents who are struggling or perhaps a new agent that's getting into the business?
No, that's a great question. And the advice does not differ based on where you are in the market, because I think the first thing is, it sounds a little trite, but it's play the long game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You are looking to have a strong career, not just a good year, and be mindful of the habits that you allow into your workspace, and assure that those are habits that are going to be supportive of the type of business productivity that you want to have. And if you analyze that and create your plan, and then redirect your focus away from your units or GCI or volume goals, and instead focus them very specifically on the process that you are following every day. And regardless of whether someone transacts that day or anything, if you have done what you need to do on a daily basis in terms of getting in touch with folks that you want to have first and second position mind share with, done over time, that is the most potent piece of advice I can give an agent. It's focus on the process.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that's so reflective in a manner of like just being a business owner.
Yeah.
Like people can get very segmented in the business and get, hyper focused on one aspect of it, or one aspect of a bad habit, you
Right.
know, and from what you're saying, it's like, keep that 30,000 foot view
Right.
and play that game
Yeah.
so that you know that your numbers are still going up.
Yeah.
But on a monthly basis, it might be level, you know,
Yeah.
you may have a down month, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But like,
Sometimes
that
it feels
advice.
boring, a little
Yeah.
repetitious boredom. Just embrace it.
that advice is
You're doing the right
amazing.
stuff.
Good for you,
Hmm.
man. This is what I love about this too, because I take so much out of this too. And it's like,
Right.
I'm not even an agent, but
We're
You
just
know?
getting
Universally
coached right here.
applicable.
yeah, it is for a business owner.
Yeah.
It's like, this is some great insight. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, I appreciate you guys letting me share.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been a lot
Yeah,
of fun.
Sarah, always a pleasure. Obviously, we mentioned this earlier as being a pillar in the community. And I think from a Cincinnati specific standpoint, we have the pieces to have and we do have such a great real estate
Yeah,
community.
we're very fortunate.
And it's built with people like yourself. And
That's nice of you to say. Thank you.
you know, having the outsider view looking in, it's super encouraging to see what the future holds, not just for real estate in general, but for Cincinnati real estate, you know, and what Keller Williams can do to impact that. So,
Well, thank you.
but thank you so much for being a part of
It's
our podcast.
been a lot of fun. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Cincinnati Real Producers Podcast powered by Nextdoor Photos. We do this every week, so be sure to subscribe so you can follow along. If you liked our conversation, leave us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts.